Coming up tonight, we visit Nassau Bahamas and take her to the edge. We check out the sports area and we take a look back at this past sailing and how the Seaside did. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 7 of the cruise view from onboard the MSC Seaside. Today was Friday, November 30th, 2018, and the final day on this sailing. Our location was Nassau Bahamas. Pretty common final stop for cruises, and a lot of the ships that we saw today were making their final stop as well. We spotted land first at 10:30 this morning. Began to enter the channel at 11:30 a.m. and we're docked a little bit behind schedule at about 12:10 p.m. We were scheduled to be docked by noon, but for once we're actually slightly late. Up to this point this sailing, we've been early pretty much every port so far. As we were preparing to make our entrance to Nassau, sitting right outside the harbor was a bit nice surprise for me, at least, the Celebrity Edge, the newest ship from Celebrity Cruises, and one that is not even sailing yet. She'll officially start her first sailings tomorrow, December 1st, but today she was making one of her pre-cruise visits to Nassau. And like she had done on a few of the previous ones, she did not visit the actual port, but anchored right off the coast and was doing some tendering. As we pulled up at about 11 o'clock, she was just starting her spin around to head back out to sea, and we passed her as she was making her way back home. When we arrived into the port, the Carnival Liberty was already there, along with the Celebrity Equinox and the Symphony of the Seas. Of course, tomorrow we'll be boarding the Symphony of the Seas. Today we got a little preview of her. We spotted her crossing in the night the other day. Now we got to see her during the day. And directly in front of us pulling in was the Norwegian Bliss once again. So we've seen a couple of these ships, the Equinox, the Bliss, already more than once, not only in Miami, but on our stops of Port of Call, and the Symphony of the Seas we've now seen at sea as well as in Miami. This evening, our all-aboard time was 6:15 with a scheduled departure of originally 7 o'clock. The daily planner said 6:45, and we ended up actually leaving at about 6:30, so a little bit ahead of schedule. The Celebrity Equinox and the Carnival Liberty had already departed just before us at 6 a.m., and the Symphony of the Seas departed a little bit earlier, about 4 p.m., with a very beautiful little exit that involved a full 180-degree spin before making her grand exit of the harbor, and that was something that I got to watch from the land side. When we finally did leave the Norwegian Bliss, the only other ship in port today was left behind. As we're sailing out, looking back, you could see her start to leave, so she left shortly after us. As for the weather today, we had a sunrise at 5:57 a.m. this morning, and a sunset at 5:19 p.m. The high, according to the daily planner, was 96 degrees. Depending on where you look throughout the ship, the TVs were saying one temperature, the app were saying another, as we've seen all sailing, but they were all saying somewhere around closer to 70. It was not as hot as some of the other days, but it was definitely a warm day, so I really don't think we hit 96 or even close to that, but upper 70s seems pretty accurate. And we had partly cloudy skies throughout the day, along with light winds. Today we did not have a shower, though at points when in Nassau looking out it seemed like it could rain, but it never did come today. Looking at our daily planner then, it was a port day, so a little bit less going on than we've had the past 2 days, a lot of different events taking place. This morning we didn't really have anything going on until our noon arrival, and after our arrival I spent a bit of time on board taking a look at the ship, appreciating the empty space that you have when in a port, and this sailing it has been extra empty. Not sure if it's an MSC thing with the international audience, but this sailing, every time we entered a port, it seemed like the ship just emptied out entirely. Even the pool decks were completely empty, so it was an absolutely perfect time to enjoy a little bit of the ship before I did head off onto the shore at about 2:30, and then stayed in Nassau walking around some of the stores and looking at things until about 5 o'clock before I made my way back on board, just in time for our dinner tonight, our final main dining room dinner of this sailing in the Seashore restaurant. And for today's menu, I went with the roasted corn chowder as my starter, as well as one of the standardized items, the French onion soup. Oddly, the French onion soup came in a different bowl today. It came in a large salad-like bowl rather than the soup bowl that we had seen the previous time. For my entree, I once again went with the panetta pasta with Alfredo. And then for dessert, I went with the warm apple strudel. And that one, while listed as a warm apple strudel, really wasn't warm. It was more of a room temperature than anything else. Something we've seen with the food in the dining room all sailing. It really is not hot. At most, it's room temperature. Following dinner then, we had not too many things tonight, but there were a couple. It was the pirate night. So, as we've seen all sailing, they do an incredible job of tying everything together, tying all their themes to their events, their activities, the games, everything that's going on. So tonight at 7:45, they had a pirate moment in the atrium, the final of those nice little preview moments that goes on the ship to help bring people together and get that atmosphere flowing. And then at 9:15 tonight, I had our final production show. Tonight was Peter Punk, once again keeping with that pirate theme even into the production show. And once again, that was another one of those incredible shows from the production team. They really do a great job with these production shows. You can tell the budget is significantly lower than we've seen on, say, Royal Caribbean, but they have so much talent in the cast that they are able to overcome it. Tonight there was some extra magic tricks, a lot of different things in there. It does start to get a little bit repetitive. This is the 7th night, and there were a few scenes that were pretty much clones of stuff that we've seen maybe 3 or 4 times already without much change beyond the costume and the music. So some of those are starting to get repetitive, but overall it was still a solid show, and tonight's actually was a little more elaborate than any of the previous ones. There were more elaborate costumes. There were actually some set pieces tonight, which we haven't truly seen much in the terms of set pieces beyond a couple props. They've mainly used the same kind of stage setup for the entire sailing. And then following that, a little bit later at 10:30 tonight over in the Haven was the actual Pirates party itself. I did not get to that. I was busy packing at the time, so I unfortunately did not get a chance to go up and check out what that party was like, but that was at 10:30 tonight. So that about did it for the daily planner, the final daily planner of this voyage. And of course, tomorrow is our departure day. They did not give one of these out at all for that. They usually don't, but there is oftentimes a little bit of a simpler version that just gives you some dining and other information, and they didn't seem to have one of those available, at least not that I've seen. But tomorrow is the last day. I'm sure there's going to be some breakfast in the morning before everybody gets off. So then, moving on to our venue tour. Today we're going to take a look at the sports area. There is not a massive sports deck on this ship, but there are several aquatic activities tied together in one small area on the top deck. The sports deck on the MSC Seaside is hidden within the funnel of the ship. Located on deck 18 and up, this vertical area features the Forest Aquaventure Park, offering a play area for the kids. Directly over top of it, on deck 20, is the Forest Adventure Trail, offering guests a net course to walk through. Right behind that, hidden directly into the structure of that funnel, is the MSC Sports Arena, offering guests a space to play basketball and other sports. This area also offers some beautiful views overlooking the Miami Beach pool deck. Forward of the Aquaventure Park, guests can climb some stairs to ride a series of 5 water slides. A small brown kid-friendly slide, a large open-air slide, a pair of blue dueling water slides that extend over the starboard side, and a 367-foot-long interactive slideboarding water slide. This unique slide allows guests to play an interactive game as they travel through the slide and over the port side of the ship. At the top of the structure, directly behind the funnel, is the zip line. The longest at sea, it extends over the Aquaventure Park, MSC Sports Arena, Miami Beach Pool, and ends right above the video screens at the very aft of the ship. That is the sports area, and as I mentioned, for the most part, with the exception of the zip line, the items in that area are complimentary. And tonight we have our final daily dine of this voyage. We started out this sailing with the first daily dine as a buffet, and we are going to bookend the sailing with another buffet. This time we're going to take a look at Biscayne Bay Buffet, which is the family-friendly buffet located up on the pool deck. The MSC Seaside features the unusually located Marketplace Buffet on Deck 8, but up on Deck 16, the Biscayne Bay Restaurant and Buffet occupies the more traditional buffet location. Directly off the pool deck, this smaller venue has a more island-like vibe to match the purpose. Offering just one buffet station that extends across the forward wall of the venue, it is significantly smaller than the other buffet, making it more suited as the overflow venue. For this reason, it only offers breakfast and lunch, though even those services are limited to just while at sea. The one unique feature of the venue is the inclusion of a complimentary ice cream station behind the buffet, making it the only place guests can go for free ice cream while on board. So that buffet is often a very similar lineup to what is down in the market, but it is also a much smaller buffet, which means it's actually a little bit easier to get around, but there are less tables, and with everybody on the pool deck at lunchtime, it can become a madhouse and way too crowded to kind of get around. The other odd thing is they do close it down a lot, so there are a lot of times you cannot even go there. Even if you're up on the top deck, you have to come down to the market buffet in order to get anything. So for the most part, I think I might have gone there like once, maybe twice. I mainly stayed to the market because it was always consistently reliable to just go there and expect that there'll be something there, whether it be the grill and pizza or a full breakfast, lunch, or dinner service. Pretty much until about 1 a.m. every day, there tended to be something there, while Biscayne Bay was closed a lot of the time. And the really bad part of that is, on board this ship, there's only one place you can actually get ice cream without paying for it, and that is in Biscayne Bay. They have it behind the counter, a machine, and there's an actual person there to get you the ice cream cone. And that is available at least for lunch. I'm not sure about breakfast, but when they are closed, you cannot get ice cream. And that means that days in port like today, where they do not open up for lunch at all, doesn't matter how hot it is out there, if everybody was dying like in St. Thomas, there is absolutely no ice cream on board this ship to get. And that does not seem like something that should be. If you're on a cruise ship, most people want ice cream. A lot of ships have ice cream machines out on their pool decks all over the place. On here, you can get ice cream in about 3 or 4 different places if you're willing to pay a ton for it. And that's the problem, is they have ice cream as long as you're willing to pay. If you want free ice cream, it is very restrictive and almost impossible to get because it is typically closed. We had 2 sea days on this sailing, and pretty much if it wasn't a sea day, they were not open for lunch. So you really could not get ice cream very often on board this ship. So that kind of leads us into our review, our look back at the sailing. And it was certainly a different sailing than we're used to with Royal Caribbean. Some things were good, some things were bad. A lot of variety. Different is certainly the best way to explain it. The weather, though, was incredible. I'm not sure I've had any sailing with as good a weather as this sailing. It was absolutely beautiful. We had calm seas from start to finish. A little bit of rockiness yesterday through last night, but today it really is not too bad. And overall, when you looked out there, they were pretty much calm. There were moments where it was completely lake-like out there. So we had absolutely perfect weather. Seas, wind, temperature, sun, a couple sprinkles, but nothing major. Everything really did cooperate for this sailing. And then the food. Obviously, one of the biggest things when people think of a cruise is the food. And on here, there are a couple elements. You've got the buffet, you've got the availability, and you've got the main dining room experience. And in terms of the main dining room experience, fortunately, that is one of the biggest areas that the Seaside seems to come up short. They have, as I mentioned before, an absolutely terrible layout in the main dining rooms. The tables are just so close together and cramped. There's, of course, the odd incident where the one day they decided to just randomly change to an open seating format. They really do not seem to have the traditional main dining room experience. It is a very low-budget experience. Really, it's barely even above an Olive Garden. It's hard to say if it really exceeds an Olive Garden, to be honest. Things that you're used to in a main dining room on other ships, where they pull your chair out, help slide in, where they take your napkin and put it in your lap, they make sure your waters are topped off, they check on you. None of that stuff happens here. It really is just you at cramped tables that are all on top of each other, pretty much essentially long tables like you were sitting in a cafeteria, and just people bringing you your food rapid fire as soon as you were done, getting another dish out, not coordinating between the different people at the table to make sure everybody is staying in tune. It really is a very poor experience for a main dining room, and that is part of the reason we did not go there many nights this sailing. Normally the main dining room, that nighttime dinner experience, is one of the highlights of a day on a cruise, but unfortunately for us on this sailing, it really was not worth the effort to bother with. And that is truly a shame, because that is such a huge part of a cruise. And even those days that we didn't go, you never knew what you were missing. You didn't know if you were missing a great menu that you should have stuck with it and gone, or if it was good that you skipped it, because they don't have menus available until pretty much the time that everyone sits down for dinner. There really isn't any way to know what's coming up later today to ensure that you don't eat the same thing for lunch. And since they're making those menus based off of what seems to be what's available on the ship, there have been a lot of overlap between the lunch buffet and what's been in the main dining room. The buffet, on the other hand, was a pretty big highlight. It certainly a nice layout. It looks like a very traditional buffet, but the way that it's broken up into little sections, it doesn't get that massive long line, but it is still a very central and straight buffet that you can take a nice clean lap. Sometimes those islands are nice because it breaks things up. You can just jump in, get different things, but it becomes a little bit chaotic and congested with everybody running through there. With the way that this was laid out, it really helped spread those people out over a much larger area and kept it from getting overly congested. It really was a nicely flowing buffet, and the way that they duplicated things in a sequence rather than just mirroring the buffet from side to side made it much easier to find and get what you wanted without having to go all over the place or go out of your way to find the food, because you're never more than half a buffet away from any item. Overall, though, the complimentary food was in my opinion, above average. It was much better food than we've seen on most cruises. There were a couple misses, but even those weren't really big misses. They were just slightly off. Everything seemed to be pretty much in line or above what you'd expect. And a lot of their food just was a little bit out there, a lot more international styles, and everything seemed to be true to the international style. It wasn't Americanized or softened for people. It was the true food, and that really is what kind of set the food on the ship apart, was that it all seemed to be truly authentic and flavorful foods rather than just the bland Americanized versioning of everything. And while the appearances weren't always a priority, a lot of the dishes were pretty basic looking. It didn't matter because the food tasted good. So it's nice when the plates look pretty, but in the end, it's what they taste like that matters, and that's where they seem to be hitting their mark most of the time. And of course, we went to one specialty restaurant during this sailing. We went up to the Butcher's Cut, and that was an absolutely exceptional experience. I mentioned specialty venues are what you'd expect the main dining room experience to be. That is where you get that slightly higher level of pampering that you expect on a cruise, that you're used to getting on cruises. And of course, the food was incredible up there, even better than anywhere else on the ship. And in there, it was incredible not only in terms of flavor, but a lot of it just looked pretty as well. They had a lot of good presentation to their food as well as the flavor. So the specialty dining venues are definitely a big positive on this ship. The hours, though, overall for dining are not the greatest. Cruises typically have 24-hour food. Here, it's only about 18 hours of food. There is a 6-hour period where there is no food available, and that's beyond the fact that pretty much for 20 or sometimes 40 hours, there are periods of no ice cream availability complimentary. There are hours where there's no food, and when those buffets are closed, that means there's also no drinks available. So for large portions of the day, you simply cannot get a drink anywhere. When they close the buffet upstairs, if you're up on the pool deck and getting a bit thirsty, you have to go down 10 decks to get a complimentary drink. So there is very limited access to anything free on board the ship in terms of food and drinks. And then the entertainment. You have your dinner, then you go to your show. The two big nighttime events of every cruise. The entertainment was surprisingly solid, and this is one of those things where I was really lowering my expectations, expecting bare minimum, very little. I mean, you've got one cast performing 7 shows a week, 7 different shows a week, each of those 2 to 3 times a night. That is about 20 shows a week that they are performing. That is a lot for a cast to pull off, but they do an incredible job of it, and the shows are surprisingly entertaining. With a cast like that, I was really expecting them to be pretty simple, just very basic song and dance, and there's a whole lot more to it than the traditional song and dance. They really do an incredible job of pulling off a lot more than you'd expect with very little. There is, as I mentioned before, not a whole lot of budget look to these things, but the entertainment value is there, and that is what matters with these shows. Is you want to make sure that people are entertained, they have a good time, and they leave feeling like it was worth their time, and that seemed to be the case every night this week. There really was not a show that I left feeling like, I should have missed that one. And that isn't always the case with those guest entertainers. So MSC took a chance. They did not use any guest entertainers. They went with their own in-house team, and it seems like, in my opinion, it paid off. They also do seasonal shows, so these shows change every couple months. So even if you come back on this ship again, because the Seaside is America's ship, she's in Miami, she's staying here for a while, if you choose to come back again, you'll have a different set of shows. So even that element is not a downside. So really, they took a chance, and I think it is working for them. And in addition to that production cast, you've got beer prov on board. That is unique to the Seaside. That is something that they partnered with a company, took a chance on them, brought them on board, and right now they're entirely focused on this ship and making sure that this is a success. And that was absolutely incredible to see. That was, as I mentioned before, the best entertainment show I have seen on a ship. the quest is always fun. It's always entertaining. There are other shows out there that are fun and entertaining, like Love and Marriage, but Beer Prov was solid hilarity from beginning to end every single time, never a miss, and that is something that you really can't find any other show on a ship that can compare it to. That is that jam-packed full of just pure comedy gold, and it is always original. It's always different. It is always in the moment for that particular audience. You never get those stale jokes, those jokes that you can tell were written for Holland America or some other ship than the one that you're on. Everything is about you, this ship, these people, what's going on in the moment. And that is something that you really can't compare to anything else. And that is probably, in my opinion, the biggest hit of this ship, the biggest win in terms of anything. Food, it doesn't matter. That show alone is the number one reason to see the Seaside is Beer Prov, in my opinion. And as I said yesterday, I went to the family one and the adult one. If they did one every single night, I would definitely be there every night. If they did two, I would as well, because you really can't get enough of it. It is that good. So if you're ever on the Seaside, do not miss it. Do not wait for the last night thinking, well, you only have to see it once. You have to see it every time. You have to see it from the beginning, because that first time you take a chance and go to that show will be the last time you ever think about not seeing one. And both of those things took place in the Metropolitan Theater, and that was a surprisingly good theater. First day I walked into that theater, I looked around, thought, where is this thing? I mean, that thing was tiny. It really did not look like anything special. But it is so well designed and laid out. It doesn't matter where you sit. There's not a bad seat in that house. The angle is perfect that you can see over people. The way that it's designed and laid out, all the poles are in the back, and they didn't put any chairs behind poles, so you'll never have an obstructed or even partially obstructed view. It is a very well designed theater, and the lighting in there is really neat. They use LED lighting mixed into the Art Deco of the walls and the ceiling to allow the room to basically glow in all different colors, and it casts a really neat illumination over the room where it lights up without feeling like they're actually lights shining on you. So that is certainly a cool theater on board, and one that outperforms its appearances and certainly outdoes its first impressions. And of course, they also had those 5 and 10 minute moments in the atrium. Another great little innovation that they have on board here. Little previews of what's going on at night, getting you ready for the mood of the night, the theme, whatever party it is. And those aren't much. They really are not that spectacular or anything special, but they're just 5-10 minutes, so you don't feel like you're wasting a lot of time. You don't have to get there an hour early. They're just a little moment of fun and entertainment, and when you just have a couple of those scattered throughout it, it's amazing how big of a difference it makes. Those little moments, the shorter shows, the quick little 30-minute games scattered throughout the day and the evening, all those little things add up, and you end up actually getting a lot of different entertainment value, a lot of variety in your days that you wouldn't have when everything is 60, 90 minutes long and you have to be there an hour early. When everything's 30 minutes, 40 minutes at most, and you only have to get there about 10 minutes early, it's amazing just how much you can actually see and do in a day on board here. And most of those are run by the cruise staff, and we see a lot of cruise directors, cruise staff, activity managers. There's something very special about this one. There's something about the bond they have between each other, the way that they're able to interact and work with each other. They certainly have a different attitude and tone to them than the other ones. It was definitely less PC than we typically see on the ships, and that added a whole level of entertainment and connection to them. They were very down-to-earth, fun, energetic, and everything, as I've said many times, tied together. And I think that was the real difference, is the way that they interacted with each other and tied the various events together, really kind of built this cohesion throughout the ship and every day. And throughout it all, they always talk about family. They always ended every show with the same song, the same dance, and they really use that to build that bond, to back up what they're saying with the reality. And when you have something like that, it really does make a difference. You usually don't see those kinds of things, but as you start to see that pattern, you see the same element come through, it really does spread beyond just them and us, and it makes everybody one large family. And whenever you have that moment, that's when things truly start to become natural and become more enjoyable. Then I haven't talked about this element, I think, at all yet on this sailing, but MSC has a pretty interesting loyalty program. It has, I believe, 4 different tiers, the highest being Black Card, and on this sailing I was a Black Card member, first ever MSC sailing, and I was already the highest ranking loyalty program member. They are a new cruise line, or at least newer. In the US market they are pretty much brand new, and they are trying to get their foot in. As part of that, they realized they needed a loyalty program, and not only do they create a loyalty program, they created a matching option. So you can actually join their loyalty program and they will match any of your levels. So my diamond status over at Royal Caribbean translated into Black Card, which is the highest level in their program. So that meant I got the highest, the best, the most of any benefits you can get within their loyalty program. The downside is, unlike most cruise loyalty programs where you earn points through dollar or nights or sailings and it just keeps accumulating, here they actually expire them. So you get points based off of a standard conversion of the sailing's length and the category that you're in, whether you're in the lowest tier categories or the highest yacht club categories. You get points for every, I believe it's $150 that you spend either pre-cruise or onboard the cruise, and those points add up to get to the various tiers. So if you keep cruising, you'll keep adding points, you'll build up, but the problem is that after 36 months they expire them. So in 36 months from now, my black level will go away, my loyalty number as a whole will be removed, and I will no longer be a part of their loyalty program, and I'll be starting over again. So they bring a lot of people in, they brought them all in at that black, but you have to keep sailing with them, which is a pretty smart way, because one of the main reasons you wouldn't try MSC is because that's one sailing you're not getting to add to your loyalty growth at Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Princess, whoever it is that you sail with. So by matching, you essentially get to jumpstart at the same point that you're at and kind of remove that barrier, which is part of the benefit we saw in sailing with MSC, was we get to start at the same place we're currently at. Their loyalty program is, of course, different than the others. It is newer. It's thought of with the idea of long-term and what can actually be sustainable, knowing they're bringing so many people in at the highest of levels. And even with that, that means they give things differently. So they don't have any lounges or drink offers or any of those kinds of things. They don't even give discounts, really. Instead, they give you little perks and amenities. They give you freebies throughout the sailing. Almost every night there was some note, something left in our cabin related to this. Everything from an absolutely incredible chocolate ship. That was probably the highlight of the loyalty program, is a chocolate ship that is a replica of whatever ship you're on. So in this case, a chocolate ship that looks like the Seaside, about this big, perfectly replicating it, and made entirely on board this ship. A solid chunk of chocolate made on board the Seaside of the Seaside, completely complimentary. You get a free meal up in the specialty dining venue, as we used the other day. We got multiple bottles of champagne left in the room, chocolate covered strawberries. We got some hors d'oeuvres, bathrobes, slippers. You get things like free spa sessions. There are all kinds of freebies that they throw throughout the sailing. So it is different than some of the others where you just get those couple hours of free drinks every day, or some buy one get one offers or discounts on things. Instead, they give you different things to get you to try experiences and try different areas of ships, see what's out there. And part of that mindset might be in the thinking that, well, if these people are black and they haven't actually sailed before, they probably need to know what these are like. So for us, that meant checking out some things that you probably wouldn't have checked out, like the butcher's cut, and that was certainly a big piece of changing our tone and our view of this ship and this sailing. So the other big element of a cruise, of course, that we've often had a love-hate relationship is the technology. There are a couple elements of technology on board the ship. One of them is the MSC for Me band. Nice little watch band that you can use to get into your cabin, purchase things. That comes free with certain levels of rooms, as well as available to purchase for, I think, $5. We got the lowest level room, which means we did not get one of those walking around the ship. I really did not see anywhere selling it or even advertising pushing it, so I did not get one of those selling, so I have no idea how well it works. Saw a couple people with it. Most people didn't seem to have them. Never saw anyone use one, so I really can't say whether or not it works. I kind of wish I had one because I would have loved to try one out. I had the Disney version last week, and of course tomorrow I'll buy the Royal Caribbean one to try that. But unfortunately did not get one of the MSC ones this week to see how those work. But the second element of it is the MSC for Me app on your smartphone, and that works surprisingly well. That was actually a very solid app, very useful. Used it almost continuously every day. I was constantly in and out of that app, looking at things, finding information, checking on stuff. It worked the entire voyage. It's obviously not perfect, nothing ever is, but it was surprisingly solid to use. It was very cumbersome to set up, as I mentioned on that first day. It was really confusing, even as someone that understands technology, to understand what it was asking and how to get through the menus. Doing our free internet offer was also equally confusing and cumbersome to set up, but the app itself, once set up, worked very easily. All the activities in the daily planner seem to be 100% accurate. They obviously have a lot less in the daily planner that we've seen, but what was in the app seemed to match what was on the paper and seemed to always be accurate. They only were loading them the day before. Looking yesterday and today, I've been trying to figure out when it shows. It seems like it's only about 11, 12 o'clock at night that they finally load the next days, so they're not loading several days out. They're loading the very next day, and it should be pretty accurate because at that point I almost always had the paper copy in my room before it ever showed up in the digital app. What matters is that it worked, and not only did it work, they also had a few convenient features like auto-loading arrivals and departures. When you make a specialty dining reservation, it automatically shows. Any show bookings automatically showed. And even booking shows was very easy, and one of the features I really liked and found useful was that it actually showed you and color-coded how full each showtime was. So when you looked at a show, you could actually see every show and how many seats were remaining in it. So if you're looking to switch between shows, they did not have an easy way to change times, but you could look and see, well, the 8 o'clock show has 0 seats left. The 9:15 has 147. So if you're going to cancel the 8 o'clock to move to the 9:15, you know you're going to get into that 9:15, and you also know that you're probably not going to get back into the 8 o'clock. Whereas if you're going the other way, you may inadvertently cancel a show and not be able to get into the one you want. You never had that worry because you knew exactly what was out there. And that was incredibly handy to have and use throughout the sailing and making decisions. And even the ship locator worked surprisingly well. It always seemed to know exactly where it was. Unfortunately, the map of the ship they have loaded in there is not the greatest. It has really ugly kind of labels on it that makes it a little bit confusing and cumbersome to deal with, but at least always knew where you were in terms of what deck and pretty much the exact location you were standing at any moment, which is really impressive when you see that. When you can actually just launch the app and have it tell you that you're on deck number 14 standing next to this wall because it knows your exact spot within the vessel. The only main bug I really found with it was that shows that are in the Metropolitan Theater that have reservations, or anywhere that have reservations, only shows in your agenda if you have a reservation for it. So things like Beer Prov, you can go whenever you want, go every time you want. You are able to make reservations for that for some reason. And if you make a reservation for it, it will show on your agenda. but you can only make one reservation. So if you want to go to all three, you have to remember the other two because you can't get them on your agenda no matter what you do. The other thing with the agenda is that your standard dinner does not show on there. Your dinner reservations will, but not your 5:15, 5:30, whatever time main dining room reservation. That one will not show there. And the fact that they have the port arrivals and departures makes that agenda incredibly handy to use because you can tell when you'll be in port, when you're going to be going to any shows, all those things, any events you're looking for, but it makes it hard to coordinate the events around dinner because it does not show there. You don't see those conflicts at all very easily. And they show you not only the start but the end times of all the events, which makes it really easy to tell when things are going to be a little bit too close to get between or if you have a nice little gap to head somewhere else. And in addition to the mobile app, you also have a series of screens around the ship. The MSC For Me screens are located all over the place. They include spot to touch your card to that basically personalizes it to yourself, including your dining information, and allows you to make additional bookings through there if you don't have access to the app. Not sure why, but for some reason I really did not touch those all week. I tried using it a couple times, found it a bit cumbersome, more cumbersome than the mobile app, which might be the key here. I use the ones on the Royal Caribbean ships all the time, look at them almost every day, usually several times a day. But this entire sailing, I think I tried like 2-3 times and just could not do anything. I think part of it is access to information. There is more information on the phone app than there is on the TV app. And the lack of the main dining room menus is probably the biggest thing, because that was always the main reason I used those screens, was to find out what the dinner menus are around the ship. And those are not on there or on the mobile app, so that really pretty much meant there was no true reason to go look at those large screens on the wall when you've got pretty much the same thing and more right in your pocket. Then there's one other element, the ship itself. You can't forget the ship. This is a brand new ship. It's, well, not too new. It's exactly a year old as of yesterday, but it is a brand new design, built from scratch, new ship design, new class, completely new idea for MSC. It's not an evolution of a previous design. It is a new from scratch design, built knowing the modern world, knowing modern ship technology, ship design, knowing what guests want, how the cruise industry is operating at the moment. There is nothing legacy that they are fitting into the mold here. They had completely clean slate to build whatever they wanted to with this ship. And it is a beautiful ship. When you see it in port, it really is one that stands out because it looks so drastically different than any other ship in port. I mean, when you looked at the Quantum class, it looks unique on its own, but then you stick it next to a Norwegian Breakaway class and they start to look the same. You stick it next to Solstice and it's the same thing. Even the newer Disney ships have that similar design. This one has a few of those elements, but it's just so drastically different in the back. It's like when you see an Oasis class in port, where it just stands out as something unique compared to the rest of the ones. Inside, she is beautiful. There are so many different styles throughout the ship, and somehow it seems to work together. There are different styles in the atrium on every floor. Each one is so drastically different and unique, but somehow there are areas where they cross over to each other and it just seems to work. When you're in another area and you see the others, they just seem to flow together beautifully even when they're so drastically different. She of course has her signature Seaside deck, which wraps down both sides of the ship and around the back, and that really is her biggest selling feature in my opinion. The area in the back just extends the Marketplace buffet so seamlessly out there. It's additional seating, but it just feels like a part of the buffet. You don't even feel like it's a separate area like back decks often feel when it comes to a buffet. It just flows and everyone flows in between the outdoor and the indoor so seamlessly, as if it was all just one large space, but they are clearly divided so you don't get that mix of temperatures and conditions like you do on some other ships that truly do leave them wide open. Beyond there, it gets a little more divided. Coming through the middle area, through the atrium here, there are a lot of doors, a lot of different areas to access the outside, but they're not as obvious. They're a little more hidden. It's mainly that buffet area that they really kind of blend them together. And then when you get to the front in the gym and the spa, those two areas start to flow into it well again. Overall, they're great areas to just hang out, watch the sea go by, get some of that sun. A lot of people use it. The back area is almost continuously packed. Even late at night, everybody goes out there to eat. Come out for late night snacks at nearly 1 in the morning, and people are still going outside to eat because it really is just a nice area there to appreciate and enjoy the outdoors. Compared to normally being stuck inside of an actual buffet, it just is a much better environment to be in. And in the back of the ship, of course, she has that completely different stern to her with South Beach, which is located a deck below that deck number 8 near wraparound deck. It is located down on deck number 7, and that is a small little pool area with additional lounging space. That is not as well executed. It looks incredible. It's an incredible environment to be in, but the problem is when people lay at a pool, they want to have sun. And being that low with a superstructure basically shadowing over you, almost any point of the day, the majority of that deck almost always seems to be in the shade. It seems like you really can't find a time that it is completely sun over in that deck. So that really kind of limits its usability, and it's already a small deck, making it hard to have an impact and value. The Miami Beach pool, on the other hand, up on the top deck is massive, but it's the only pool deck that really is usable for everybody. And that means it is incredibly crowded. For the size of this ship, that pool deck, while being large, is a large deck with a tiny pool, and still not big enough to accommodate everyone. It is just way too crowded of a pool deck, and for a ship that is so focused on the sun and the outdoors and all those kinds of elements, it's a shame that there really isn't a lot of space to actually lounge out and get a suntan. It is just a very crowded outdoor space. The walkways down the sides really are balanced and sized right, but those two pool areas are just way too small, and that South Beach could be so much better, but it just has that fundamental flaw of always being cast in a shadow. The other thing about the Seaside is she's a brand new design, but for some reason they built in the flaws of the 80s and the 90s. She's got areas that are just divided. There are decks that are only accessible by passing through a different deck and then taking a staircase up or down. There are areas where you can't get from the front or the back. You must take a certain elevator in order to get there. In modern ships, these things are huge. They're so massive that you can build a walkway around anything you want. There really is no excuse to be building a brand new ship that is a 100% new design that still has these flaws in it. When you look at ships that used to have these flaws, you had it on the Voyager class. You couldn't get around Studio B. When they built the Oasis class, it was wider. They put a walkway on either side. Carnival had this problem for years, for decades. They've built the same ship over and over, and every single one had a flaw of a dining room in the middle of the ship that divided it. With the latest generation, the ship finally got big enough they could put a walkway around it and not have that problem anymore. So they no longer have dead ends. But for some reason, this is a completely new original design that was built from day one with flaws in it. And that is just, I don't know. That's just very weird for something this new and so innovative to fall back on such old and wrong practices. And the biggest issue with that is it just makes the ship confusing. It's not that confusing a ship, but when you start to have to wonder, are you even able to get to where you want to get from here, it gets very confusing. The biggest design flaw, though, is more of a business flaw, and that is the Yacht Club. It is their highest rank, their suites, extra amenities, extra features, but it is a ship within a ship concept, basically the NCL concept. But it is so massive on here. It takes up pretty much half the top of this ship, and that means 95% of the passengers on board are stuck sharing 50% of the sun space. Those numbers don't add up, and that is why the top deck is so crowded. And then, because the entire front of the ship is taken up by the Yacht Club, nobody else can see where we're going. There is no way to see what's ahead of the ship. When you're arriving in a port, all you can do is look back at the ocean and wonder when you're going to get in, because you can't see ahead of the ship. You can't see where we're headed, and there's nowhere you can go on here to see that. If you're not willing to pay more, you can't get to any of those views, and that's a real shame. On a ship that is so focused on the ocean and the outside and seeing the world, seeing what's around you, you should be able to actually see what's around you. Having to pay a premium to get such a basic benefit on a cruise just seems like a real stupid decision, and I don't understand why they ever made that one. And in addition to those design flaws, though, the construction of the ship has so many quality issues on it. When we had that rain shower in St. Thomas, it revealed a major flaw all over the ship. The steel is not in any way smooth. There are so many spots where not just little puddles, but massive 10-foot wide, maybe 4 inches deep puddles form on the deck and stayed there for 2 days. There were massive puddles all over the ship that just stayed there. They weren't getting cleaned up by anybody. They weren't evaporating. They weren't moving around. They were just too big of a puddle, and they were just sitting in what were flaws in the steel that were just creating natural ponds all over the place. There were areas where there were smaller ones that once the water sat there, you could identify them, and when you look closer, you could see rust forming on them. So it's certainly an issue with the ship that's going to make it wear really poorly over time, because there are puddles of water that just form all over the place. And we've seen something like this before with the Quantum, but that was more, they just had water that was flowing poorly and they need to put drains. Here, it's not even that the water is flowing in a way it shouldn't. The steel itself just has like divots and dips all over the place. It just collects the water instead of letting it flow to the drains. The biggest issue, though, is probably the vibration. I have never felt a ship that shakes and vibrates as much as this ship. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, I've been at the top decks. I'm out on deck number 19 filming arrivals and departures, and you can't touch the railing. If you're holding onto that railing to try to balance yourself, hold a camera steady, your whole camera's just shaking that whole time, because the ship just vibrates from top to bottom, front to back continuously. If you're in the atrium on any level, you can just touch the glass of the atrium and feel that vibration. I have never felt a ship vibrate as much as this. Most new ships use azipods. All that vibration, all that feeling gets moved outside the ship and really keeps it separated from the guests. When we sailed the Grandeur, that was something I immediately noticed, was that new kind of feeling, that little bit of different movement. But it was pretty much the first floor of the atrium, a little bit beyond there, and that was it. You never felt it throughout the whole ship. And on here, it's almost like there's absolutely nowhere you can go that you can't feel that vibration. It really is that strong of a vibration. And today, when we departed, I was in the dining room still on deck number 5, and when those engines kicked on, it was like the entire ship just started shaking, and we hadn't even started moving. So the engines are certainly in some way sending vibrations to the ship in a way that should not be. And I don't know if Seaview has these problems, if it's something specifically in the construction of Seaside, or if it is a fundamental flaw in the design, and all the C-class ships will have this flaw. But it is certainly noticeable, and one that doesn't seem to go away, not one that you get used to, because you'll just be doing something and all of a sudden realize it's shaking again, which is just weird. And then the biggest downer, in my opinion, on this cruise, the thing that really hurt it more than anything else, has to be the crew and their procedures. The crew themselves are incredible. They're incredibly friendly. This company is very family oriented, and they treat everybody like family. There's such a bond going on with everybody, and that is great to see. But that might also be the biggest flaw of the ship. It might be that they are so family focused that they forget the fact that they really actually have some things to do. There are actual policies and procedures that need to be followed for things, and I'm not sure it's an actual issue of the crew as much as I'm not sure MSC actually has any policies and procedures in place to do things, because some of these items are not designed into the ship, which means that the cruise line as a whole is not concerned about them. Some of the biggest ones are health. They really aren't that concerned about health or safety, it seems like. When you go in and out of buffets, there's nobody that forces you to clean, unlike other cruise lines. Even the actual cleaning stations are small off to the side. Half the time they didn't even work. You'd go up, the water wouldn't be working, the soap's not working. They were not designed to ever be used, it seems, because even the layout and the flow of them, to dry your hands, you then have to try to go back through people to throw those paper towels away. It's like they never expected more than one person to be there. But the fact that most of them seem to not work when you go to use them doesn't make them much of a benefit, and it certainly doesn't help prevent the spread of disease, noro, any of those kinds of things. So they don't seem too concerned about cleaning. The theaters never get cleaned. There's never anything closed. They never clean between shows. It all just kind of stays there. You see dirt throughout the ship, which is not good, especially on the floor in the theater. You can just see the clumps of dirt around. It's like things just get pushed around rather than cleaned up. The safety, they don't seem to really be all that concerned with. There's no security. I've been here recording this for an hour and a half, and I have not seen a single security guard walk by. You really don't see any security throughout this ship, and that's something you see everywhere on all the other cruise lines. I've seen more people overly intoxicated on this cruise than any other cruise, and there's no security monitoring to make sure somebody doesn't hurt themselves or someone else. I've seen somebody get knocked down the stairs because somebody was so over intoxicated, and it took 20 minutes for security to show up, longer for any medical to show up. There's no real initiative, no concern about guest safety, security, cleanliness, and that's all at the corporate level. That's an MSC thing that seems to be a fundamental flaw, and one of those things that just can't be overlooked, and that's not something that's a Seaside problem. That really is MSC's problem to fix. Probably the most egregious acts that I've seen, though, comes from cleaning the decks. Something you see on every ship, but here, for some reason, it's not coordinated appropriately. They never block off the area, they never lock doors, so you'll just randomly go through a door and find everything's getting washed down at the moment. But the biggest issue is they wash areas that should not be getting washed because there are people in them. I saw multiple times now where people are sitting out and they just start spraying them with hoses. What ship does that happen on? MSC, apparently. I saw that at the White Party, a big event like a White Party. You got tons of people up there, you got cruise director staff, it's organized, it's coordinated, it's scheduled, it's a huge event. They put up special tables for people to sit at, and the second that it was apparently scheduled to be ended for, but there were still a ton of people hanging around, they were out there cleaning the pool with a pressure washer, and the huge cloud of water starts flowing over everybody that's up there. That's not good. That's a pretty big issue. And you'd think, well, maybe it's a one-off issue, except last night they had the Seaside's first birthday bash up on the pool deck, just like the White Party. The exact same thing happened again. I'm going to assume this happens every sailing, and yet it's not corrected, it's not changed, it's not accounted for. This isn't an issue of the crew. This is an issue of MSC policies, procedures, and training here. Today, when we're in Nassau walking around the outside Seaside deck, going through the infinity walkway, there is tons of water coming down on the one side. I looked up, one of the cleaning vehicles was sitting there and apparently was leaking, and it was just gushing water all over down on the walkway. You could not walk through it. It was not closed off. It was not blocked off. Nobody was doing anything. No one was even around. And then when I got to the other side, everything was fine over there, and all of a sudden it started to what seemed like drizzle, except there was no rain. I looked up, could not find anything. There were people sitting there eating, and all of a sudden it just got heavier and heavier until they got soaked. People were just sitting down there eating, and randomly water started coming from the top deck that I'm assuming was somebody cleaning or something not being done right up there. But that shouldn't happen. If you have a deck down here that's supposed to be used, you shouldn't have random water flowing down. If you have events happening on a top deck, you shouldn't have somebody randomly going out with a pressure washer and spraying them. That's not appropriate for a cruise line. That's not how any cruise line should ever be operated. And that really kind of sets the tone for the quality of MSC. One item that I had in my show notes, but at the last second opted not to bring up, was crew smoking. While on board, this was the most concerning thing I saw, as I started to allude to and step back from. I'm not a fan of going after crew specifically though, so I chose not to bring it up. In the week that followed on board the Symphony of the Seas, and the time that I've edited this series, I have reevaluated that decision. I don't like changing from the moment, but in this instance, it's important that I do. The Star Princess fire in 2006 brought new light to the dangers that a cigarette left even smoldering can lead to. On board the MSC Seaside though, I did not feel that sense of concern about fire that is often shown on board a ship and stressed to the passengers. For all that guests are told and see, the crew are under far more scrutiny and pressure to be aware of these items. On the MSC Seaside though, I repeatedly saw crew members smoking in guest areas of the ship, something I've never witnessed on any other ship. On top of that, it was never in designated smoking areas, but in regular areas of the Miami Beach Pool, South Beach Pool, and waterfront boardwalk during their active work shifts. These crew members, knowing they were in the wrong, were often crouched behind stacks of chairs and other items. For most crew members, the job on a ship is their lifeline and not one they take lightly. Getting caught smoking in off-limits areas is often met with a severe reprimanding, if not immediate dismissal from the ship. If this was all the crew did though, it wouldn't have been good, but it wouldn't have been terrible. In each of the cases that I saw crew members smoking, when they finished, they simply threw the lit cigarette on the deck and went back to work. If a passenger is caught doing this, they are in trouble and could be dropped off the ship at the next port. For a crew member, this should be an immediate dismissal. This is a practice that MSC is clearly not watching over or holding any weight with to ensure that crew are behaving in a safe manner. When the crew aren't even held to the most basic of fire safety standards, the passengers certainly can't be held to any standard, leaving everyone on board at risk. That really says a lot for how they operate, how they view things, where their mind is at, and what is important to them. They're not concerned about safety or health as far as I could tell from this sailing, and they are certainly not concerned about the guests or anybody that's on board. They're mainly concerned about the money, because the biggest issue I found was this thing nickel and dimes like no other trip I've ever been on. They're not that cheap, for despite what they claim. They claim they're a dirt cheap cruise line, but I'm on Symphony next week and the price is comparable. I have an Ocean View Deck 5 here. I have a boardwalk balcony over there, and the price was not that far off. There was like $100 difference for the two. That's a pretty small price difference for a pretty big feature difference. And on here, the one thing I have to give them credit for is this daily planner is not filled with spam. There is very little spam. There is very little that you hear about going on to try to get you to purchase stuff. But what happens instead is they con you into stuff, which is even worse. They're not even open about the things that they're doing. Instead, you constantly run into pretty much every feature on the ship being a fee. The zip line's a fee. They claim it's because they can't handle the demand. Well, Oasis class handles more demand. They just did reservations, and then once demand lowered, they dropped it, and now show up when you want and do it. It's not a big deal, but for some reason MSC charges you $10 to do it. Most of the features of the ship are for a fee. There is very little here in terms of activities that is free, that's a part of the ship. All the big features and the ones that they advertise for cost extra. They're not included in the fare, which means that fare price is significantly higher than what it's advertised as. And anytime you're around the ship, they're trying to trick you into spending money. They'll ask you if you want something with your meal, not tell you about it, and then at the end try to give you the bill for it because it was extra. They try to give you free things like the meal in the butcher's cut, only to give you water, something you have every day in the main dining room, but instead of giving you water, they open a bottle and charge you $5 for it. So anytime they try to give you something, you always have to suspect that they're trying to give you something to make you buy something else you don't realize. If they ask you if you want something, they don't tell you if there's a cost. They don't tell you it's more. They don't even insinuate there could be an extra fee or anything to it. They just ask if you want this, and you don't know if it's because it's something they're supposed to ask or if it's something they're trying to make you purchase without knowing it. So you always have to be suspicious of everything, which is not what you want to do. You don't want to always feel like you have to watch your back as they're going to try to pull something on you. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of it felt like here, was you never knew what they were trying to get you to buy. And like we saw that ice cream. There was nowhere on the ship to get ice cream most of the time, but you could certainly buy it. There are a lot of things on the ship you can purchase. The things that are complimentary, though, were very difficult to find. Cruises have always been about all-inclusive, forgetting everything, not worrying about it, but on here, most of the things were extra fees. You had to pay more, you had to worry about whether you were going to get conned into buying something you didn't want to buy, and that takes away the experience. It doesn't matter what the ship looks like. It doesn't matter how friendly the crew is or how great the entertainment is, because if you are always concerned that you're going to get tricked into something, or you aren't sure what you can and cannot do, you can never truly just relax and enjoy the vacation. You always have to worry, and that's not what a cruise is supposed to be about. And that is an MSC thing. That is a corporate level thing. As I mentioned, that is policies, procedures, training. If they can change those three things, they can fix things. But for now, this is my first MSC cruise, and I don't think I would ever do another one, not with the way things are. And it's a shame, because the ship had its flaws, but it wasn't a bad cruise. The thing I like about the CruiseView is I film this every single night. I don't just go home and write a review and the last idea that I have is what it is. They have to prove themselves every day. If they do something good, it's gonna come in here. It's gonna change my attitude, it's gonna change my tone, it's gonna change how I feel about things. If they do something bad, the same thing. So every single day, how things are going is what gets reflected here. You don't get to kind of ride things for 6 days and then improve it on the 7th day and get it. You really have to perform each day, and we see those up and downs. If you do something wrong and then you correct for it, it gets acknowledged. And I think that's what really makes the CruiseView special, is that we truly see all the ups and downs, the good, the bad. We reflect the entire light of what goes on a sailing. Yeah, so MSC is family owned and operated. They like to push that. It is not corporate owned, it's not on the stock market. It shouldn't be heavily revenue focused, but for some reason that really seems to be where they are. They are revenue focused more than anything. They do give a lot away for different things, but that's to make up for issues, to make up for their problems. They try to ask forgiveness more than correct them to begin with, and that may get them somewhere in the short term. In the long run, that's not going to get them a loyalty base. It's not going to get them their repeat cruisers. They really need to up their game, up their quality, make their ships feel safer. All over this ship, people have talked about the same things, the safety concerns. When they had a crew drill, I didn't see it, I was not on board the ship, but I've heard multiple people make mention of crew members reading manuals when they should have been taking part in drills. That doesn't make passengers feel safe and comfortable. That makes you question how this cruise line exists, and makes you wonder when MSC's Concordia is going to happen, because when you feel they're not concerned about the right things and guests are visibly seeing these things happening, it's only a matter of time till something goes on. So hopefully someday I'll get to revisit MSC. Maybe things will be a bit different then. The entertainment team was top notch, and the food was great, which are two of the biggest parts of a cruise, but they need to get things together, to get their act together, get the corporate side figured out, because you gotta feel comfortable on a ship in order to really enjoy the vacation. And until that comes, I cannot sail with them again, but hopefully they'll correct that and I'll have another beautiful new ship that I can check out in the future. But for this sailing at least, tomorrow we arrive into Miami at 7 a.m. Along with us, I think Symphony arrives at 6, a couple other ships with us at 7, and then a few more at 8. There's, I think, 6 or 7 total ships in, so it'll be another busy day in Miami tomorrow. For this sailing, though, Let's take a look back at our itinerary before we end. So we of course started in Miami on the 24th with a day loaded with ship departures. We then had our first day at sea with beautiful sunny weather and smooth seas. Our evening visit to Puerto Rico. Beach day excursion in St. Thomas. Stop in St. Martin with a load of ships once again. Another sea day to celebrate the Seaside's first birthday. Of course, today we were in Nassau, Bahamas, alongside the Symphony of the Seas, where tomorrow in Miami we'll be heading over to her. So, that about does it for this sailing and this episode, but be sure to stay tuned for the links and come back tomorrow as we'll be starting our Symphony of the Sea sailing, and we'll take a look at the departure process on board this cruise, something that we haven't been able to do in the past since we have not had any episodes past the final night. But this time we will have an episode that will feature the departure from the Seaside and the boarding process for the Symphony of the Seas. So as always, I am Picone, and stay tuned for those links.